We sat there with hundreds of people signing autographs and chit-chatting. After about an hour or two, it all dissipated as everybody went on their way. Our handler thanked us repeatedly for being so gracious, but it was our pleasure to be honored at such a beautiful event. It just startled us. Then we had a big concert, and one of the pictures online was so hilarious but telling. There was a dread laying on the floor asleep after the show with a look on his face of complete peace. He wasn't somebody drunk and passed out, but just someone who said, "I'm just going to sleep here. This is a beautiful place." That was one of the best concerts we ever did. It was filled wall to wall with black people. It was like coming home. There's no other way to explain it. For two people who love Bob Marley, love Jamaica, love the message, the experience couldn't have been any more important. Our benefactor who brought us over there was the United Nations. They put their money behind everything. We didn't fully understand that until one of the bigwigs from the UN stepped up in one of these meet and greets and let us know that fact. We ended up doing interviews right before Barack Obama, our most illustrious black president, since we were touring Europe at the same time. Small countries like Latvia and out-of-the-way places in Europe, not just the big cities, and Obama was over there too on his own tour. I was at these interviews saying that I consider myself an American citizen, but more than that I see myself as a citizen of planet Earth, implying that there are more intelligent beings and forces in the universe than just us. Then not long after that, President Obama said the same thing, and it was a big controversy. They said you can't say you're a citizen of planet Earth because you're an American president. Again, it's another moment where I realized people were paying attention to what me and Guru had to say and how we were conducting ourselves on the whole mission. I've always felt that people from different walks of life, even from the highest realms of life, saw that our message was an important one. It was music, but it was beyond music. We were a traveling comedy show in a lot of ways. We joked all the time. Very rarely did you catch me and Guru serious, unless there was a problem. Other than that, we were laughing and smiling. True ambassadors of hip-hop. Going into our fourth album, it was our most adventurous, where we were comfortable once we left everything else behind. We were venturing into completely untouched territory, not only musically but also video-wise. This is the album where Guru prophesied his own death and demise. Guru 8.0, Lost and Found. Brilliant album with a tragic foreshadowing. It was a revolutionary project in its scope, touching on everything from artificial intelligence, the wars, to the Illuminati, and including things we were experiencing in the band. We found we experienced the same things James Brown was going through with his first band. It was like a mutiny going on in the process of making that album. We kept the core in place with one who was like another brother from another mother that Guru loved, a brilliant multi-instrumentalist, David Scott. We got rid of the other members, and they knew they were on the way out. I didn't have to like the guys when I hired them, but I did want to have people that fit what we were doing musically. Then, I started to see the jealousy as they tried to set Guru up a few times in different situations. One dude used to gossip all the time. I called him a leper because he had eczema as I had never seen anybody else have in their life. Like a snake, peeling all the time and setting up drama. Guru liked him, but I never did. It got to that point where we realized we had to get rid of these dudes. Guru was a very upfront dude. As soon as we'd finish up the next tours, that was it. He tried to keep the peace, and so did I, but it was time to move on. And as we toured, we set up new arrangements and personnel, and created a fresh strategy. Even if we weren't partying because they were assholes, it just made better sense. It would have been a better model for us because I came up with tighter ways to tour that were more efficient and made more sense for the size of the endeavors. The scope had grown, and so many people wanted to be a part of it, so it made sense to do things the new way. We lightened the load and kept it moving. From 2008, going into 2009, Guru started having some problems with his back. He began complaining about it on tour. Sometimes we had to grab his bags for him, and he wasn't that type of guy. He always pulled his weight. We stayed in the gym, and at that time he was in great physical condition, so this wasn't like him. When we got off tour, he would tell Queen Asia or me, "I'm not feeling well. My back has been bothering me." Since we subscribe for the most part to holistic healing in my home and even within the nation of gods and earths, the 5% teachings, we lean more towards holistic healing, naturally, as opposed to resorting to Western medicine if possible. Obviously, if you break your leg, you have to get it set, but I'm talking about things that can be handled and prevented holistically if possible. Earlier I mentioned that Guru and I both agreed that he would clear out everybody negative from his past. One reason is the level of stress it caused, and I always warned him of the ill effects of carrying too much stress. Before Guru was having any pain, he was aggravated trying to clear everybody out of his life. One, in particular, was this shady doctor connected to the lawyers, accountants, and managers from back in the day who Guru fired. But he didn't get rid of the doctor or tell me that the doctor was connected back to them. A decision he would live to regret. He went to see this doctor for a so-called physical exam for insurance purposes, he'd said. When he came back, he had all these band-aids on his arm. So, I'm asking what's up with that? He responded that the doctor took blood. I asked for what? I might state that some of my views on Western medicine, a lot of people are just not going to understand. I'm not giving up blood unless I must. Every time you turn around, they want some blood. We had talked about all of this. It's always iffy sticking out that arm for no reason. It's one thing if you get in a car accident, get shot, stabbed, or need a transfusion. But to voluntarily go and hand your arm out to be injected? Not long after that, Guru starts having this back pain that's not going away. So, he goes back to the same doctor to check it out. Through all this, I didn't know that this doctor is connected to the rest of these crooked lawyers, doctors, managers, and accountants and had come at their referral. When this doctor tells him there was something suspicious about this thing on his back, and he wanted to send him for a biopsy, I didn't know anything about it. Guru called me from a subsequent appointment and was breaking down. After asking what was wrong, he explained that they told him he had cancer. Who told you, you have cancer? I asked. The doctor that I told my back was hurting, he said. Why didn't you go to the holistic doctor that the Queen and I sent you to? I found out that when he went to the holistic doctor, they told him not to let those other doctors mess with it. They told him you may have a bump or a tumor, but it's not bad, and it's not big. It's going to be uncomfortable, but leave it alone and go on holistic treatment, massages, acupuncture, vitamins, and herbs. Instead, he goes messing around with that doctor who comes back to him a positive biopsy, and jumping in his ear. You know you've got to have this operation now. He didn't know the scope of the surgery. May or any of the G's that we were comfortable and close with knew. The only thing I knew is that it was supposed to be a small operation to take out this tumor. This doctor now puts him with another one. Another devil, in my opinion. This is where the story starts to get crazy. This operation cost $200,000. Unbeknownst to Guru and me, they mysteriously cut off his health care before this operation. He had good health care coverage going into this. They all know about this cut-off, but we're still going to give him this expensive operation with no insurance money to cover it. This is unheard of in American medicine. They bring this assassin in Dr. S clothes in on the pretext of being a Guru/Gang Starr fan who also happens to be black, selling the idea he was in his corner. It was a lie, to keep Guru comfortable. I found out before the operation that they were threatening him with, if you don't have this operation, you're going to be impotent. You're going to be using the bathroom on yourself, and these things weren't happening yet. This is what they told him would happen if he did not have this operation immediately. All very important matters, so he co-signs to the surgery. He called me from the hospital once he had already checked in, the night before the operation. I'm saying hold on G, I'm going to get 3 other Gs on the phone, so now all of us are telling Guru not to have this operation. First, see how things go with the holistic treatments, and if they don't work, then start thinking about operations. None of these things that they are saying will happen. Now keep in mind the boxer Daniel Jacobs had the same cancer in the same place, and he's still fighting for championships. He proves these cancers are curable by other means because they didn't give him the butchering operation they gave Guru. I got to the hospital that morning thinking he just went in for a light surgery to remove a small growth. They had him in there for 8 hours. Took his guts out of his body and moved his insides around. All to then attach a metallic apparatus that looked like something you would buy from Home Depot. There was nothing wrong with Guru's spine. The tumor was on the side of it, maybe weakening it at that. They had him out for 8 hours and he had asthma. You can't put someone like that under for that long and risk collapsing their lungs. This was medical murder in slow motion. I was there by his bedside when he came out. I suspected what was going on and what had been done, and so I wanted to get him out of their clutches to see what could then be fixed. Having always felt like the brother protector, I was beside myself trying not to wild out on them, knowing he still had to be in there to recover. I stayed by his side, but they were hitting him up with morphine, connected to a constant drip that he could click to release when in pain. For this type of operation, they kept him in the hospital for a day or 2, and then he was out. They gave him the bum's rush out of there when he should have been in there much longer. He didn't look like he was in shape to go home, but we took him there. At this point, he'd made his family aware that he's had this operation. I was sitting there when the call was made. He was in a lot of pain when he spoke to them. After that, I spoke to his father and brother and told them that he had this operation and we were hoping for a successful recovery. His father was in his 80s and having problems with his heart, and his mother was very sick and in the hospital. We were trying to keep the stress of the situation to a minimal for the family. His brother was at Princeton teaching and with his own family. Guru's care was going to be on me while he recovered. That's what friends do. At the time, I was putting myself under self-hypnosis, believing that things weren't as bad as they were. Now looking back, in my heart I know he killed himself when he let them open him up and go into him the way they did. Or another way to see it is, he was murdered by the operation. But I believed in miracles because I've seen them even with Guru. I saw them during our friendship, and I had to believe that there was going to be one more. We got him home from the hospital, and they sent a home health aide to be with him for different periods during the day. Just to make sure he was doing what he was supposed to do. He wasn't as sharp mentally as he was before this operation. He would have this fogginess, and wasn't as clear-eyed at first. What I do know is before this, he had no problems with his mental clarity. The nurse says, "It's fine, this does happen sometimes." She was working with him, so as far as I know, he was doing what he needed to do to recover from the operation. I was out to dinner with a friend that had come in from Florida, when I get a call from the Queen saying the neighbors had called. Guru was outside half naked, and the police had come and gotten him. In shock, we left dinner and luckily weren't too far away. We got to the house where the police had him inside with a blanket over him. I've never seen him like that, but he was not really with it at all. I was trying to talk to him, and the police were very kind and professional, and they then left him in my care. So now he was like a baby, and I had to babysit him. We got him to another hospital in Rockland County, and I told him, if he were going to go the route of operations, he should have done it in Rockland with doctors that I know, and we can trust. They were kind to us and protective of Guru, but they were dumbfounded that he had this kind of operation. They were confused as to what was going on, and they were trying to treat him to solve the problems along with his blood levels. Once they stabilized him, they sent him back to where they did the surgery initially. We took him back down to this devil's base of operation to talk to him, and nothing he was saying is making sense to me. He was talking about chemotherapy, and I was thinking that should have been done before you started cutting him up and sticking metal apparatuses in his back. They were talking about radiation therapy first and then chemotherapy. They had their hooks in him, but by now, his mentals were coming back again. So, they released him, and he went back home, and came out of the throes of fogginess he was in. We started in on a holistic course with vitamins. We started taking him to a holistic treatment center, one of the most renowned centers nationally. When the holistic doctor heard what happened, he thought it was horrendous. They tore his body up, and this apparatus they have in his spine has him hunched over like a 90-year-old man. He was in pain all the time now. The holistic doctor said once patients head down that road, they are committed now. He was in so deep having the surgery that there was no turning back. The time for this was before they cut, then we could have gone the holistic route fully. We took him back to the cancer center, and by now he was mentally clearer. But he realized the situation he was in and knew he messed up. The doctor was still running the same talk as he was before the operation. You'll be incontinent. I wouldn't be surprised. And I asked, then what did you even do the operation for in the first place? Then he said Guru had to go and get radiation. If the radiation doesn't work and we don't think it will, then he's going to have to go to chemo, he told us. I started reading every book I could about it. A lot of cancer survivors had books out on how to beat it. We were reading ferociously and going online looking at everything we could. At the same time, I was as supportive as possible with him. Once he was lucid again, these doctors told him when he was outside of my company to start getting his affairs in order. The lifespan of 5 to 6 years that came with that type of cancer would probably not be because he had a more aggressive form. We were sitting down and talking when he admitted, Yeji, I should have listened to you. That doctor was introduced to him by the same managers, lawyers, accountants, and producers I mentioned earlier. All these crooked, dirty, filthy individuals put him with that doctor back when he was jacked up. That doctor was one of them as far as I'm concerned. Then I did a little more research into how a cancer like that could be given to somebody. It turns out that this type of has been used by various government-sponsored assassinations for people that they don't want to kill with a bullet, to make it seem as though they died naturally. We know the theories about Bob Marley and others who've had these strange cancers that have been ultra-aggressive and suddenly, they're gone. It's starting to come together, but as far as I could ascertain, Guru had no political enemies. All I know is that when he got those injections, right afterward there was cancer. So, I looked further into it, did some more research and found that they have a carcinogen that can be injected into a human, which is essentially the equivalent of smoking 1 million cigarettes at one time injected into your body. Usually, a very virulent aggressive form of tumor that will attack some part of the body and be fatal in short order. Certainly, sounded like what Guru had and the pieces fit together. We went back to his so-called original doctor, this filthy demon that operated on him. I told him the problems that Guru was having and so he sent him down to get x-rays. Mind you, Guru's insurance was still cancelled. Even today, I don't know why. Everything was paid as far as I can ascertain. He wasn't getting any answers, and they weren't talking to me. So, we went down for this x-ray at NYU, and they wouldn't even give him one. They turned him away from the x-ray department like he was a bum off the street. I looked at them like, you just got through giving him a $200,000 operation and now you won't give him an x-ray? Not only that, you put him out of the hospital in a day or two when he should have been in there for a week. What is going on here? None of this was making any sense. Guru managed to get his insurance back in order with no real answers as to what happened in the first place. It's still not clear to me how they were paying for some things and not others. He was feeling better though, now that we were doing a holistic approach. I was getting him up every morning, making sure he was getting sunlight on his eyes. That may sound strange to some, but others will read this and understand what I'm talking about. We were going with herbs, vitamins, juice, fresh and no fried foods. Just a very healthy diet, high in minerals and beans for protein. This appeared to be working. He was starting to get out, walking in the park and doing some jogging. He was starting to do better and was as good as I had seen him in a while. He was even getting back in the studio and recording some of the songs that were going to be on the next album. Which, by the way, on the songs from Lost and Found, he didn't have cancer. So that was another lie that they put out there. He prophesied it, but he didn't have it. The songs on the next album are some of the songs in which he had cancer when he recorded them. Under the care of my family, he was doing better. It was starting to look as though he just might pull out of it. He would just have to live with that metal thing in his back. Clarence Clemens had the same apparatus put in his spine, but he was done for. So, this was the real sticking point. If they hadn't put that in his spine, he could have beat the surgery with them just cutting the tumor out. But to me, that was the death blow. We went back down to New York to see his cancer doctor. This Frankenstein agreed that he was doing better, yet rather than go back out on tour, he should instead use that window of time to get radiation treatments done. I didn't like any of it, but again I couldn't tell him don't do it. It had to be a decision that he made for himself, knowing, once you get that operation, you have to go the full distance. He found a radiology facility in Westchester and went in for radiation treatment. After this, he was not getting better, whereas before he was. People who know someone with cancer will understand what I'm talking about. They have good days and bad days. After having those radiation treatments, it's mostly not good. Now we were in the fall of 2009, and going back and forth to the holistic center to get his vitamins. After the radiation, he didn't look well again. He looked somewhat okay for a while, like he could have made it, but hindsight tells me he was never going to be able to make it with that huge piece of metal stuck in his back. It was going to be too much pain for the rest of his life. He would have never stood it for long. And that was the end. The last trip we took to the hospital was in February of 2010. Guri checked himself in. Eddie Griffin talks about, in his new comedy special, how Charlie Murphy would have chemo on Wednesday and then be on stage on Thursday. Guru was the same way. We went out and did some shows, but he wasn't the old Guru. From my perspective, I could tell things weren't going to go well, as far as him beating it. During all this time, before he went in the hospital, on the good days, we would be writing the book. I was the constant optimist, telling him he was going to beat it, but he started to become pessimistic and was beginning to question if he could after all. Once he started writing his life story out, he hoped that he would get to tell it to the world. With the hopes that part of that story included being a cancer survivor. But he also made it clear to me that I was to tell fans, if they're reading this by Solar's hands, then I didn't beat this. I'm authorizing him to write the truth of my life, so listen to my brother. He's the only one I trust to tell it. That was the premise of the book. He also authorized me to be the sole teller of his life in not just books, but movies, documentaries, and anything meant to memorialize his life. I was to be entrusted with our business and even looking after his son. He wanted me to take over his visitation rights on weekends. We were close enough with his ex-girlfriend, where he thought that was going to happen. Even I thought there was a chance it would happen until that evil sister of his got involved. His ex was used to having the son spend weekends with his dad so that she could have time to herself. We never had a bad relationship with her. Even now, I have never had any bad words with her. She just aligned herself with the wrong people, and that was bad for him, for her, and for his son, my godson. Once it was clear that Guru was entertaining thoughts of not being here, He knew it was those evil people that he managed to get away from that still got him in the end. If I had as much control over him as people said I did, he would still be alive right now. If I did have that level of control, I would have never let him get that operation or stay with that doctor. There would have been no chance of him getting cancer that he then needed an operation to get rid of. That February, he went into the hospital. His ex-girlfriend, sister, and family knew he had cancer, but none of them had bothered to visit. I was going to get his son and bring him to see Guru and spend time with him on his good days. His ex-girlfriend never came to visit him. She never really had anything to say about it one way or another. This was his last time in the hospital. I was his healthcare proxy through all of this. For those who don't know, that means I was the person that was closest to him, that was giving him care, and that the doctors will refer to for any medical decisions he couldn't make for himself. Before it got to this point, we discussed machines to keep him alive and his burial arrangements. This was before that last hospital stay, and after the doctor told him that his cancer was going to be terminal. He was advised to get his affairs in order, so he prepared a will on his own, and other business arrangements were made. Life arrangements were also made as far as his son was concerned and what he wanted conveyed to his ex-girlfriend. I lacked anticipation of what the family was going to do. Not his father and brother so much as his sister and the nephew. They went ballistic and off the rails. Eventually, he went into the hospital under new treatment and with the fine doctors in Rockland County. I was hoping things were going to be much better for him than with those other devils that certainly hadn't helped him. Now they wanted to give him chemo, and before this, he had never had any. I was at my wit's end and a nervous wreck. I didn't know what to say. He gave them the okay, and they began treatments on him. Because of the chemotherapy, he was not eating, and so they wanted to put a feeding tube in his stomach. I'm not a doctor, but I do know that he was in bad shape. I'm thinking, whatever you got to do to save his life, do it. Give him a fighting chance to beat this. They gave him the feeding tube, supposedly to help him, but again they were not paying attention to the fact that his lungs were weakened and that he suffered from asthma. Guru ended up going into an anoxic state, which is more or less a coma. So, I'm assuming what the doctors called a heart attack was an anoxic condition dealing with blood oxygen to his brain. But it's not a coma because it has to do with blood levels and oxygen levels, and you can come out of an anoxic state if that corrects over some period. There was a reason to remain optimistic. He was still in critical care. I had to call everyone and say, I don't know what's going to happen now. According to the doctors, you have to come down here and make your peace with this man. I was falling apart when the sister came right away from Washington or somewhere, with some weirdo boyfriend and her daughter. The first thing she does is ask me, what's going on? Who's handling the money and the business? Not how is he going to be? What's the prognosis? She didn't hug him, kiss him, or cry. She came in like a lawyer, which she is. But that's not what you would expect from her under these circumstances. I would hope my family would be nothing like this if anything happened to me. I was in shock, just hoping that he came out of it, and he did eventually, but briefly. The nature of their visit was just to question his affairs. I needed them to understand that I was handling business. Right then my focus was Guru and getting him better. That's what this is about right now, I explained before she disappeared, and I didn't hear anything more from her. The next thing I knew, somebody called me asking if I'd seen this article on a major hip-hop news website. She was publicly saying that I wouldn't let the family see him in the hospital. Meanwhile, she had just seen him the night before, and I didn't tell anybody anything of the sort. And I couldn't tell anybody that I'm not his family. How am I going to keep someone's family from them in the hospital, unless it could be documented that the patient was being beaten or abused by them? At the same time, they started to throw out the whole homosexual rumor. No one had ever said anything like that about us. My head was spinning because now his enemies are swooping in to destroy this man on his deathbed. No one knows if he is going to make it or not, but this is what people do to him while he's lying on his back trying to survive. When Guru came out of the coma for a little while, he was fairly with it. He could communicate, and he knew what was going on. He was aware of his situation and knew things were super critical, and that he had to listen to what the doctors were telling him. So of course, I was not telling him what his family was doing to him. I would never do that. He asked about his son, and I explained to him that he did come to see him, but he was out of it. But his ex never brought his son to see him. I was lying to him because, at the end of the day, I didn't know what else to do. I was willing to tell him whatever wasn't going to make his situation any worse. And just hope for the best. Every day I was looking at the media seeing those vultures going nuts. They were starting websites about me. Foxola.com, while I'm trying to care for this man who's just come out of a coma. Guru and I were watching the Olympics with me trying to keep him up in good spirits. Meanwhile, these crazy stories swirling around the internet were eating at me. Of me stopping the family from coming to the hospital when they had just been there. His nephew came to see him and still puts up a video making people believe that I prevented him. I was there when he came up. He even made accusations that Guru went to the hospital in a coma and that I signed papers for him on the way. But there was no ambulance. He wasn't in a coma when he went to the hospital. They didn't have any facts to support what they were saying. Their words were disgraceful considering the seriousness of losing a loved one. They were aimed at me but ended up being bad for Guru, for his son, and for everybody who loves him. I couldn't pay much attention to this because he was not responding well to treatment. He'd been in the hospital for almost a month, and now they wanted to hook him up to a life support machine. I agreed to that since Guru okayed putting this step into place if this type of situation occurred. Sometimes people can get hooked up to life support and come back around. We both agreed to give him every chance we could. He had only been in a coma for a third of the month now. Not for any extended amount of time. Outside of that week and a half, he was in a coma. For the rest of the month in the hospital, he was functional. Just like any other person in the hospital in a rough condition, he knew and understood what was going on. He could handle whatever needed to be handled or discussed with me, the doctors or anybody else. His family was nowhere around. They were not in his life. Not calling or coming to the hospital. They just basically wanted to see how bad he was and that's it. They took their feelings about the whole situation to the media. The next thing I know, the nephew had a t-shirt line out that he was trying to sell as the G was dying. He was setting up a documentary on YouTube about things he knew nothing about, and Guru wasn't even dead yet. By then, apparently, they had united with Premier, who at some point claimed that he came to the hospital's critical care ward and saw Guru. He said his hair was uncut and his toenails were too long, and this is what he used to blast me and blast Guru. My response to him and everybody else was this man is in critical care ward. They're trying to save his life. I have no authority to be in there doing anything or saying anything other than what will save him. I don't think that the doctors and the people in that ward are concerned with his toenails or his hair growing long. There is no photo shoots coming for this man in the critical care ward of the hospital. But this is the sick, pathetic nonsense out there at that time that tainted an already painful situation for his friends and his fans. All you have to do is search it on YouTube. He's right there saying it. They don't even have the decency to take it down these years later. This man was in dire straits. I could understand if they wanted to come to the hospital and make peace with him or pay last respects. But to come there just to say that it's my responsibility to cut his hair and nails and I'm wrong for not doing it is ridiculous. I believe that the doctors at that point did everything they could to save his life. Everything. But, by the time he got to them, all these other treacherous actions had already been done to him. Medical murder is what I will always call it. He was just too far gone for anybody else to handle. He was in God's hands now. Not long after they started this whole campaign, it seemed like Guru knew what was happening. I didn't tell him, but maybe someone from the hospital knew and did. To this day, I still don't know. Maybe it was a coincidence, but after everything broke in the media, he was gone. They called me from the hospital and said it was over. I gathered myself and went there to see for myself if my friend was truly no longer here. That morning at the hospital, every step, from getting off the elevator to walking down the hallway of the hospital ward, all seemed surreal and in slow motion. Stopping at the desk, all I could see was a somber mood. Everybody had wanted to save him. They knew who Guru was and his importance, and they wanted him to beat the cancer, but he wasn't responding positively. I'm not a doctor, but I look back at all of this and know that they tried to save his life. His prior doctors? They murdered him just as surely as if somebody put a bullet in his head. At least they set the ball in motion with their actions. Before he passed, I had a chance to talk with him a lot. To even reminisce and reflect on life and death. There is a picture of him and me on a pyramid in Mexico. The very important thing about that picture is we were hosted by a faction of the Mexican government as honored guests, even by the heir to the Corona fortune who was married to an ex-diplomat of the United States. So, we were again brushing elbows with the elite. There, they did a documentary on us, and we were filmed on the Pyramid of the Sun, which is very appropriate for me especially. We had very deep beliefs that include the idea that death was not the end. The immediate ones who were going to suffer from his demise would be his loved ones. The selfish pain of myself, his son, his godson, my queen and my daughter who he looked at as his godchild also, and his family members such as his father and his brother. We loved ones would mourn what wasn't final though. And what would the haters miss about him? I'm not exaggerating when I say until the day he died, he hated that one sister and he never even mentioned his nephew. In memory, he came around one time to a show and Guru was so uncomfortable, I'd never seen him act that way. He acted more like a weirdo fan, not like his nephew. At first, I couldn't even wrap my head around the fact that he was saying this was his blood. He was always asking Guru to help him with his career, and he was out there running around in LA up to nothing. Guru just didn't like this dude, and I would challenge him or any of them to produce a picture of him with Guru. Or anything that would show that they had any loving close relationship where they even spoke at any time. This is the nonsense I was looking at while making peace with Guru and getting ready to send him off. All I could see was that my brother was gone. Then I saw this other dude jumping up doing victory tours, running around doing shows off Guru's name. The DJ that used to DJ with us was also running around doing shows and concerts. They asked me to do some and I said, no. I'm not going out here to celebrate anything. There's nothing here to rejoice over. The promoter's response was, well, they're doing it. I said, because they're evil and they're doing it for $1. I'm not evil, and I don't need to do that to remember my brother. The best way for me to remember him is for me not to die right along with him because that's how I feel in my soul and my heart. With all the lies they were throwing up online. I wished one of them would have stepped to me. I was so angry and so hurt that if anybody had come within a few feet of me and said something wrong, I would have broken their necks. That's just how angry and upset I was about all of it, but when they came with their filth, I just shut down. They hacked one of my email accounts, and I cut it all off. I was on Twitter, and I just shut it off too. I'm like, forget it. I don't even care. They even chose to put the emails up, and there was nothing wrong with any of them. They were just normal emails. Certainly nothing scandalous, but they were just picking like vultures. These are cowardly people, and I'm thinking, do they want to see the guns? I have 2 sons, a biological son and adopted son, and a daughter. I have many G's and Earths that love me, all my family members and friends that came together to support me and love me, and my community of Rockland County. I can't lie, they saw what was being put out there in the media, and these people were upset. Constantly asking why don't they talk to us. People were calling and emailing me from all over the world. Who are these people they're talking to? Talk to us. Everybody knows Guru didn't talk to Premier for 5 years of his life, and everybody knew that they were no longer together. They pretended in the media like they were good friends and that they were in the studio working. This talk was beyond bizarre. The best thing I could do was to heal myself and be good for Guru. I know he didn't want me to die with him, and I know he didn't want to see his dreams and his legacy turned over to people he hated. At the very least, people he certainly would never have envisioned or trusted with his legacy. Especially not the girlfriend he broke up with in 2005. His most valuable material possession was his music catalog. And all the things that he represented, what he wanted to do, what he believed in, how he saw his legacy, all of that was entrusted to me. That's what I've done, and that's what I will do. In my own quiet, dignified way, I memorialize Guru's wishes daily. Everything I've done and everything I intend to do is with his wishes in mind regarding his legacy. But of course, he would have always wanted to see me be successful, and in fact, I'd push on with that inspiration. After my time of mourning and dropping out of the limelight, I went back into ventures I was involved with before to further heal myself and to help the babies. Guru and I loved the babies. I got deeper involved with business ventures outside of the music field that were very lucrative for me. I went back to things I do best, which allowed me to spend more time in the community, more time with my family, and figure out my future. I've signed new deals for myself and deals to represent the future moving forward and to stay positive. I've chosen through my interviews to speak the truth. When I was being interviewed on MTV with Sway, I explained everything that happened. I laid it out about the will, the letter, and everything that Guru wanted. Again, to a massive viewership for that year, maybe because people wanted to know the real deal. There's no way that any of these people can say that anything I did or said was wrong. All they could do is make up lies about me. Some of those lies were so blatant that everybody in the business knew it. Guru was not homosexual, and they knew I was not. I've researched and taken a good look at this, and this has never been done to a star after they've died. If anyone ever said something like this about them, it was being said when they were alive, and there may have been some credibility to it. This was never said about Guru when he was healthy and alive. As far as I can ascertain, it appeared that they hired publicity companies and publicists who were well versed in that world. They also hired people who were involved with the dark web and the nefarious side of the internet to handle the slandering of Guru and myself. These are professionals that knew what they were doing, and they went at things with skilled destruction in mind. I only had a publicist that dealt with normal things. They did some crisis management, but they had never seen anything like this, and they were unprepared to deal with it. It caused a huge controversy. There is no question about it, and that's all due to those that carry jealousy, greed, and hate. I had nothing to do with that. I just said what I knew to be true. That's all I could do, all I've been doing, and all I'll continue to do. That really brings me to where I am now. Just moving forward to a time where I can defend myself. It's time for the truth to be heard. Not just the truth of how Guru died under tragic circumstances, but also about the positive legacy of his music catalog of such musical depth that has been overlooked due to negativity. Yet, how rich and colorful of a life he got to see before his demise. Still, in all this rush to go out and tour for themselves and push their names, his name and his work were just pushed to the side. I don't care about name and my work because I know people will appreciate what I've done on a level that doesn't need fame. I just want to see Guru's legacy be held where it should be, at the proper level of esteem and respect with all the greats, like Pac and Biggie. There's been some period now, 7 or 8 years, since his demise. You can't bury truth but for so long underneath lies and slander. No matter how sexy you make it or how enticing or how much the current world we live in now wants this type of negativity, truth takes the highest road. It was just never really afforded a chance for the whole story to be out until now. When the hospital notified me of his demise, I told them of the wishes to have his body transported to a reputable funeral home in Rockland County that does cremations, and that's what they did. I contacted the family and told them that his body was there. His father and brother were well aware that under Guru's righteous provisions he did not want to be buried, and chose the form of cremation millions of other people around the world do. The sister, premier, and whomever else was in on it decided to make up a story in the media to say I stole the body. They are lucky to this day that I never filed a suit against them for slander and defamation. I've just chosen to rise above it and hope that when people look at my interviews and read this book, they look at what Guru and I did as a musical team and rise above the scandal. I wouldn't be the first person, or Guru, to be framed by hip-hop media, and everyone knows that. With Prodigy when he passed, and peace be upon him, I didn't know him well, but there was a whole lot of nonsense that was flying around with him and Havoc before he passed. But then after, they forgot about all that and just talked about the positive. Same thing with Tupac. When he passed, they dropped all that talk about whatever might have happened to him on prison up north, and moved on to his legacy, besides of course trying to figure out who murdered him. But with Guru, they just made up something and put it in place of the good parts. I see the same people who murdered him having a hand in that because all those parties are clear in their allegiances. When you look at what I and Guru represented, it was the pure truth of hip-hop, lived as a lifestyle and the way it started out, with a focus on delivering good music and a message. Not mogulism, not whoreism or pimpism. We were here to uplift the people. To have them rejoice in something created by purists when it came to music. Something beautiful and powerful that changed the world and continues to. But now that it has been so corrupted and so tarnished, I can see that the whole hip-hop game went into the toilet. I've never seen it in the state it's in now. A shamble, and I think anybody who loves hip-hop can agree with that. It seems like the world is in a downward spiral since the day they killed Guru. I can pretty much connect the dots, and their motive was clear and simple: ego. He made them feel bad. They would have killed me too if they could have, but they have a good idea I'm not the one. Outro. Take a rest. After declining slowly in a sea of scandal and envy from people who should have loved him completely in his final hours, Guru returned with less of a hold on a spotless legacy than he deserved. It is up to his fans to remedy that. It is up to hip-hop and hip-hop jazz lovers, and of course, all those Gang Starr and Jazzmatazz fans, along with all who could recognize a message tucked inside every one of his genius lyrics. In the following section, I've chosen albums and songs that fans and new listeners alike can relish when remembering what Guru came to this earth to do: make mind-blowing music that stands the test of time. So you can leave out on the sounds that made his legacy what it is, and remember him the way he wanted and deserves appreciated. He needed it in life, and he deserves it in death. By your listening to and re-examining his music, in light of his life story, you can give him the dignity due to an artist who gave up to his last few breaths. You can also discover what made him so critically acclaimed when you peel off the negative and dive into the meaning of life through Guru's songs. He will not have lived in vain, and he will not then die in infamy. In his music, he never dies. After so much adventure in life and exploring his creative depths, his body just took a rest. Discography: who's gonna take the weight? I thought I would have to carry the weight of his legacy, but that makes no sense since it's so much larger than even he could carry in his lifetime. Therefore, I can share it with fans and music lovers worldwide, and everyone can carry a little piece of him, of the message, and the memory of his great sound. Guru Foot Common, State of Clarity. If you want a quick taste of the hip-hop jazz flavor Guru was bringing, you can sample it with this one, but fans already know. Catch his intro dialogue here and it will bring you behind the scenes of his ideology and methodology behind the album. He introduces the players, describes his inspiration and intentions for bringing one of the most innovative compositions of sounds ever conceived in hip-hop. It's what helped bridge many a generation of old-school jazz purists and new-school hip-hop street kids. Jazzmatazz Volume 4, the Hip-Hop Jazz Messenger Back to the Future full album. Listen deep. Nuff said. About the author. Solar, the #1 hip-hop/jazz producer for the past decade, with the #1 jazz/hip-hop album of the decade, Jazzmatazz Volume 4 to his credit, and the #1 jazz/hip-hop single of the decade, State of Clarity, he recorded with the rap legend Guru Rip featuring Common and jazz legend Bob James. Solar stands alone as a legend in hip-hop music who began as a teenager in NYC, breathing in the fresh sounds of the city around him and dreaming of leaving his mark on hip-hop music's rich history. Solar is a producer, rapper, actor, and songwriter who has performed on world tours with legends of all music. His partnership with rapper and lyricist Guru led to their founding of the successful record label called 7 Grand Records, and collaborations with legends of every genre of music including jazz, hip-hop, rock and reggae, gave him the credibility to continue as one of America's best and most in-demand hip-hop jazz producers worldwide. Solar is much more than a beat maker, he is a complete producer. He is driven by excellence and is in complete command in the studio. Solar brings a wealth of perfection, confidence, intelligence, and wit to the hip-hop arena. His vision for 7 Grand and its impact on the hip-hop culture and the youth today is something of great magnitude and uniquely essential. Jazzmatazz 4 as the revolutionary approach of the first ever underground Jazzmatazz mixtape The Time Bomb, Solar continues to redefine the role of producer. While the Jazzmatazz brand has a following of its own, Solar has injected a new energy into it. In between recording albums, Solar is immensely popular on the festival circuits, extreme sports arena, and have been selected for several corporate events, most recently for Scion, Las Vegas Envy, Miller Genuine Draft, Chicago IL, Sony PlayStation, San Francisco CA, and Red Bull. A fan favorite in the extreme sports arena, he headlines snowboarding and skiing competitions at Mammoth Lakes, Park City, Aspen, Breckenridge, Vail, and skateboarding events at the World Skateboard Championship in Prague, San Diego, and Los Angeles, to name a few. He's also a favorite on the worldwide stage, where he headlined the prestigious Blue Note Festival, Ghent, Belgium, the Montreux Jazz Festival, Switzerland, and the Hague Festival, the Netherlands, the My Jazz Festival, Oslo, Norway, and illustrious jazz venues like Quasimodo, Berlin, Germany, the Jazz Cafe, London, where his back-to-back shows always sell out, and South Africa, where he was invited by the United Nations to perform at a benefit event. An opportunity with MTV Europe sent Solar to Albania for the largest outdoor concert ever in that country. Solar has also appeared at huge festivals and concerts in Russia, Spain, France, Japan, Greece, Germany, the UK, Chile, and Brazil, to name a few. In addition to the albums, Solar independently released 4 successful videos, all directed by Solar. The videos for State of Clarity, 'Cause I'm Jazzy, and Jazzy Ways all received national play by BET, MTV, and VH1, in addition to hundreds of regional stations. Video views on the internet have been incredibly strong. Several licensing deals through movies, video games, and advertising, such as Sony Pictures Redline, Sony PlayStation, Xbox 360, USA Networks in Plain Sight, Coca-Cola, Ford Focus, Smirnoff Ice, Heineken, and Scion. Solar has been featured guest on national TV shows such as Bet's Rap City, MTV's Yo MTV Raps, and Fuel TV's The Daily Habit. In addition, Solar was asked to appear on G4 TV's Freestyle 101 to the fans How He Killed the Mic. Internationally, Solar has been featured on MTV UK, MTV Australia, MTV South Africa, MTV Brazil, MTV Japan, MTV Sweden, MTV Poland, MTV Brazil, MTV Russia, MTV France, as well as the BBC and numerous others. 7 Grand owns the trademarks to Jazzmatazz, Gang Starr, and of course 7 Grand that can be utilized to create profitable products in the music, film, and apparel arenas. 7 has proven itself as a successful global company across the world in both record sales and tour revenue. With its expansion into fashion, television, film, and video games, there's so much more to come. Our movement has only just begun.